Living with poops. Shauna's home was declared one of the worst hoards in the show's history, yet the most shocking secret was what she had been eating for 12 years. The crew had to suit up in biohazard gear for the first time ever due to the severity of the house situation.
We started with a biohazard crew.
No, I understand that.
99% of the time, the biohazard crew comes on the final day when we've cleaned up. Okay? This is the first time in hoarder history I've ever suited up.
Shauna's madness and her last stand turned cleaning into a real conflict. But to drag her from the suffocating grip of that nightmarish filth, the team had to battle her tooth and nail for every last rotting scrap of trash she desperately defended. That was when the fight exposed deeper horrors. The team tried to throw out expired moldy food, and Shauna would definitely not let them. In her mind, that fuzzy green loaf of bread was just the best dish she could have. She insisted she could just pick the mold off.
It's a little bit mangled here, but
it hasn't even been refrigerated.
it's still perfectly good. I could still eat it. This has never been opened.
This is covered in mold.
It might be a little bit moldy because I don't have a freezer.
So you're gonna eat moldy bread?
No, I'm gonna pick the mold up.
If you don't see the rot can't see you. Shauna's not wrong, though. An unopened container, she argued, was always safe to eat, even if it was covered in dirt. The team had to explain the concept of cross-contamination to her, but she still dismissed every single one of their points. Yet, it was not only about the food. Another secret was exposed, leaving everyone absolutely disgusted. The mission went from saving the house to saving her in an instant. Shauna's house was filled with bottles of her own urine and feces. When she brushed off concerns about her collection, the crew dug in harder, only for her to reveal a truth they would never believe. Asked if she would eat food that had touched fecal matter, Shauna didn't flinch. Her reply was a defiant, "Well, I'm still hell-bent." However, if this was home, what wasn't she ignoring? Her backstory finally pulled the mask off. After her mother's death, Shauna was left alone in the house they had shared, a house already cluttered from her mother's own hoarding. Drowning in grief, Shauna overlooked the problem, allowing the hoard to eat up every inch of their home until it became uninhabitable.
I think it's hard because we lived together and our lives were entwined with one another. I don't know, I just miss that.
The city posted an eviction notice, which she ignored and handed off to her sister. And after refusing every bit of help, that's when her family called in the show. Still, nothing could have prepared them for what they would find inside. The cleanup was not entirely successful. The house was such a biohazard that the only solution was to gut it completely, leaving nothing but a skeletal frame of 2x4s and a lingering smell they couldn't get rid of. However, in a twist, many sources indicate that Shauna is now hoarding again in a new apartment, facilitated by a new exploited partner who encourages the chaos. The Rat House. Glenn Brittner built his own kingdom with thousands of rats to seek solace from his crushing loneliness. And, in the end, that unbearable isolation became the knife cutting him down forever. The tragedy began after his wife died suddenly in 1989, when Brittner's overwhelming grief led him to adopt a colony of pet rats that soon bred out of control, overrunning his home and forcing him to abandon it. He was left to sleep in his backyard shed as the rats would attempt to chew out his hair to make a nest anytime he fell asleep. Upon arriving at his house, the cleanup crew initially planned to capture the rats without harming them. However, they quickly realized the scale was unimaginable. The rats were so embedded in the structure that luring them with food was useless. Still, if the rats were still there, how could the team possibly clear the house? They had no choice but to tear down the walls. Each strike of the hammer revealed a horrifying scene that frightened every crew member. As walls came down, they discovered massive nests hidden in the ceilings, floors, and even under the bathtub.
They're in furniture, in drawers, up in the ceiling, in the walls, in the mattresses. Oh man, they're everywhere.
Glenn watched, heartbroken, as his babies were violently caught. But for every rat they caught, another 2 burst out from the shadows. The count climbed from hundreds to thousands, then beyond anything they could keep track of. Glenn had given each rat a name, calling to them as they truly knew him. The final emotional blow was seeing all of his kids packed into carriers ready to be rehomed.
You did great today, but all of a sudden, a drop of the hat, you just told me again about finding your wife. And that wasn't your fault. You can't blame yourself. Your wife had a heart condition. You can't blame yourself for that.
But after sacrificing his entire furry world, what kind of life was left for Glenn? The turnover was a success. The rats were adopted out, and Glenn just kept a single rat, Commander Whitehead, as his own pet. He began rebuilding his life, yet the peace he found was tragically short-lived. In 2015, vulnerable in his wheelchair, Glenn was murdered in his own home during a robbery, a crime that remains unsolved. He had finally cleared the hoard. The loneliness that remained made him helpless. The deadly family. This woman fought so hard against death that she ended up building a creepy frozen graveyard for hundreds of animals. A terror of demise haunted Terry after witnessing her father's fatal heart attack as a child. But this scar drove her to fill the void. That was around the time she began saving stray cats, unaware her good intentions were creating a house of horrors.
Back when I moved out in 2005, I knew she was taking in cats that were outside on the farms. If it was cold out, her warm hearts, oh, come on in, and I knew this was happening, but I let it go. I thought she could control it.
What started as a few pets exploded into 50 live cats living in filth and sickness. When the cats died, she couldn't let go, storing them in her fridge with plans for cremation. But the money for that never materialized, so the bodies just piled up.
She thought she was going to get money to have them all cremated, but that never happened.
I just feel so awful. I'm a failure. And that's how my whole life has been.
Hence, how do you even begin to clean a house full of corpses? The cleanup plan was simple. Getting Terry to accept it was not. The crew arrived to find freezers packed with 75 to 100 dead cats and even many other animals. Terry had to personally remove her frozen family, patting them and speaking to them as if they were merely asleep. So as she pulled out each bag, the devastating reality broke her. She sobbed, finally admitting that she didn't really love her animals because she had treated them so horribly. The crew honored her wish and had all the remains scorched, presenting her with the ashes. Now, she faced her final choice, hold on to what was left or free them and also herself. And in a moment of profound release, Terry scattered the ashes into a river, letting the current carry her deadly family away. The condemned mother. Wilma's hoarding was so severe that it entirely condemned her house, but the real victims were her own children buried beneath the chaos she created. With floors rotting and walls on the verge of collapse, the city declared Wilma's house uninhabitable.
So we obtained the warrant, served it. We sent the letter to Wilma, advising her that we were, in fact, condemning her home.
Even though she was facing eviction, Wilma's pride was a bigger obstacle than the structural damage. Therefore, her 3 adult children decided to return home, sacrificing their own well-being just to help her clean up. But would Wilma see their help as a lifeline or an invasion? The moment the cleanup began, Wilma started fighting them over every moldy book and ruined stuffed animal. In her mind, if she couldn't control her things, she would control her family.
And I feel invaded when people tell me that I cannot have
What's this about?
controlling my own life.
Control. That's a big issue for you, isn't
My
it?
life.
Wilma's children, desperate for any shred of maternal love, worked through the filth as she criticized and belittled them. The last chance to save their mother was destroying their own mental health. But they were willing to endure her hatred, yet it was about to hit their limit. When her son Dean finally broke down in tears, the cleanup came to a halt. The crew watched, waiting for a reaction, and Wilma offered none.
You see your son crying? What does that do to you? Do you even care? Why are you guys here? Why are they here, Wilma? Tell me why your children are here. If they hate you so much, why are they here?
Instead, she looked at him and coldly admitted the truth she'd held for decades. She resented him and his siblings for being born. The therapists concluded the house was a total loss, and worse, Wilma would rather be homeless than live with her family. Isolation, once again, sealed her fate. And she got her wish. She never had to live with her children. However, at the end of that cleanup, the house was still destined for demolition. Her children left with the ultimate gut punch. They had literally buried themselves in her mess, sacrificing their peace and time, and it was all for nothing. While Wilma's fate is unconfirmed, online obituaries suggest she passed away in 2023. And in the end, she died in the most tragic way any human being can, utterly and completely alone. The germaphobe's filth. This woman washed a single load of laundry 8 times to feel clean, but lived in a mouse-infested dump. How?
I just do not understand why I am a germaphobe and yet live like I do.
As a former food service worker, Judy was a clinical germaphobe, terrified of contamination. Her rituals, like sanitizing items in the sun, swallowed her life but did nothing to clean her dangerously hoarded mobile home.
If we have a real hot day, I want to put out things in the sun. In my mind, I feel like they're going to be sanitized.
It was so terrible that her family brought a cleanup crew to intervene, hoping to leverage her fear of germs to convince her to let go of the filth. However, even when they tried to remove a newspaper soiled with mouse droppings, she insisted on going through it first. Dealing with this furious woman was the real challenge. The team used a scientific meter to prove her sun's sanitizing method was useless, showing her the hard data.
I'm going to swab the surface of something that she says is cleaned by the sun and prove to her that it's not working. Below 40 on this is clean. 1,158. So is your process working? No.
Faced with irrefutable proof that her rituals were lies, Judy didn't have a breakthrough. Instead, Judy just shut down completely. Defeated by science, the crew was forced to deploy their most powerful and riskiest weapon, a heart-to-heart. Her daughter was in tears, begging her to let go of the hoard to save her own life, but she coldly prioritized a moldy bowl over their relationship. Yet, this rejection only compelled the team's hand further. Realizing they couldn't do anything further, their only option was to call Adult Protective Services to save Judy. But the clock was ticking. Every minute she stayed in that house, her health deteriorated. So the cleanup crew ended up only being able to create narrow pathways for some legroom, leaving Judy in her toxic home. Nothing could come between her and the hoard. The exclusive graveyard. Peggy called herself an animal rescuer, yet her home was filled with bodies that made her cross into criminal neglect. After her husband's death, Peggy's hoarding spiraled and she began collecting animals as a daily routine. For a moment, the animals looked safe, tucking into the arms of a rescuer. However, instead of taking care of them, this woman became the villain of her own rescue story. She locked these poor little creatures in cages, abandoning them for weeks until they faded and died.
When I walked in the front door, the stench was awful. And there was lots of bird cages and no live birds. And then also dead turtles and dead dogs.
One by one, the corpses began to stack. And as a result, the city condemned her house, declaring it a biohazard filled with a stench of decay and the skeletal remains of dozens of dogs, birds, and turtles. Still, Peggy refused to take responsibility, blaming a veterinarian for the deaths. A cleanup crew in hazmat suits arrived to remove the dead animals, counting over 75 carcasses. But they could not get past the dying beasts in enclosures. Heartbroken, they asked Peggy to apologize to the animals. She refused, vowing she didn't cause their deaths, so she shouldn't have to apologize. Even more miserable than the animals were her children, spending a lifetime being neglected for her hoard. Now, in their final moment of suffering, Peggy's daughter issued a final ultimatum: the hoard or their family. After decades of choosing objects over her children, this was their last attempt to save her. In a stunning reversal, Peggy finally broke. She admitted that she loved her kids more than the junk and authorized the crew to clear everything. But the structure hid the deeper rot, making Peggy face animal cruelty charges. She pleaded guilty and received mandatory counseling. The final inspection revealed a death sentence for the property. The foundation was crumbling, the walls were thick with toxic black mold, and the structure was deemed beyond repair. A complete and utter write-off. It had to be demolished. And while the episode ended with a promise of change, public records indicate Peggy passed away the following year in her home.